Good afternoon and welcome to a special retail and wholesale focus session of the American Floral Endowment Grow Pro webinar series. I'm your moderator, Leyton, and I'm a member of AIFD's Young Professional Council. I recently graduated with a PhD in plant breeding, genomics, and genetics from the University of Georgia. Today's retail and wholesale session is on care and handling, sell the highest quality and longest lasting cut flowers. On behalf of the endowment, I'm very excited to be part of AIFD's Grow Pro webinar series that features a new topic every month presented by an industry expert. The webinars are free to everyone thanks to the generous support of AIFD sponsors. This session is sponsored by Smithers-Oasis. Smithers-Oasis has revolutionized the floral industry with the creation of water-absorbing foam for florists. Since then, Smithers-Oasis has grown into a leading global manufacturer and marketer of floral foam, floral accessory products, cellular growing media, post-harvest products, temperature control packaging, and specialized foams. If you'd like to learn more about our sponsor, or if you're a supplier and interested in becoming a sponsor for a topic, you can find that information on AIFD's website at endowment.org/growpro, or click in the link in the chat. Today's session was pre-recorded in English, and following the presentation, Loann and Burke will join us for a Q&A. We encourage you to please submit your questions at any time through the Q&A feature or the chat. We answer as many of your questions live as we can to the end of the hour. Any unanswered questions may be answered through a separate email exchange following the presentation. This session is being recorded and will be shared to AIFD's YouTube channel. And through YouTube's accessibility features, you will be able to access closed captions in other languages. Without further ado, I'd like to present today's expert speaker, Loann Burke. Loann Burke, AIFD, AF, PFCI, is an award-winning floral designer and event specialist with Furst Florist in Dayton, Ohio, with over 35 years in the floral industry. A highly sought-after speaker and designer, she shares her passion for flowers through inspirational design seminars, product demonstrations, and hands-on workshops around the globe. Loann won the grand prize at the Sylvia Cup Design Competition, represented the United States in the World Floral Competition in France, and currently serves as design director for Smithers-Oasis. Loann holds a bachelor's degree in horticulture from Purdue University and a master's degree in marketing from Wright State University. Loann, welcome and thank you for presenting today on care and handling.
Hi, I'm Loann Burke, and I'm very excited to be a part of the American Floral Endowment's Grow Pro webinar series. Today, I'm going to take a look at proper care and handling. It's something that some of us forget about, some of us just need a quick refresher, so I'm going to go through the process step by step, starting from receiving the product all the way to the flowers in my customer's hands. So why is it so important? I want to make sure that my customers have the best buying experience possible, that they get to enjoy these flowers as long as possible. So that starts with quality product. I'm going to make sure that I have a quality source for product, an excellent wholesaler, a really good source for good quality product, and then I'm going to inspect it when I receive it. I'm going to remove the packaging, give those flowers a little bit of breathing room, make sure that they don't have any trapped moisture that might allow mold to grow. And then I'm going to inspect the foliage. Is my foliage nice and green? Are the flowers good quality? I'm going to remove any foliage that might be below the water line. I'm going to do this so that I don't get any foliage in my water. Any foliage in the water may be a breeding ground for bacteria, and I definitely don't want bacteria to clog the stems and shorten the flower life. I'm going to give my flowers a sharp cut. I'm going to cut off about 1 inch. I like to cut off a little bit more of the stem end. And then I'm going to give a quick dip into a stem sanitizing or a quick hydration solution. That's going to clean off any bacteria on the lower 2 inches of the stem, again, so I'm not putting bacteria into that water. I'm going to put that directly into a bucket of properly mixed flower food. So let's take a minute and talk about flower food. What's in flower food? Flower food has sugar to feed the flowers. It has an acidifier to lower the pH of the water because flowers like a more acidic solution. So I'm going to make sure that that's properly mixed flower food. I'm definitely not going to guess. I want to make sure that it's the perfect amount to keep my flowers happy. What we do at the shop is we use a dosing system. So we've got the flower food that's hooked up through our water supply. It comes through a hose, kind of like a gasoline pump, automatic. It's automatic, the perfect concentration of flower food in my bucket, no guesswork. If you don't have one of these, I would strongly suggest you consider getting one. If you don't have room for one, then make sure you have a system in place to properly measure. Having uniform buckets will help, but you want to make sure that that flower food is properly measured every time. From here, I've got my flowers, and again, as I'm inspecting my flowers, if I come across something like this, these stalks have some yellow leaves, that tells me that somewhere along in the cold chain or somewhere in the flower care process, perhaps these weren't kept cold, maybe they were damaged by some heat somewhere along the process, or maybe it's just older product. But it's definitely not something that I want to give to my customers because, I want to make sure they have the best buying experience possible. So I'm just not going to use these. So I've got all of my flowers processed, trim off any leaves below the waterline. I may use one of this type cutter as long as my blade is clean and sharp. A quick lop into the quick dip, and then into my bucket of properly mixed flower food. From here, I hear a lot of people say, oh, we need to leave this bucket out for 2, 3, 4 hours or even overnight to let them properly hydrate. That's just not true. I take this, and unless I have to have a flower open to the perfect stage for, say, an event, a wedding, a party, I'm going to put this bucket directly into the cooler. If I need my carnations to open up a bit, I might leave those out. But other than that, we don't need to leave our buckets out to properly hydrate. They're going to hydrate better in a cooler with proper temperature. So what is that proper temperature? It depends on the flower. For most flowers, we're going to want our cooler temperatures to be between 34 and 38 degrees. For tropicals, we want those 55 to 60 degrees. If you don't have a tropical cooler, it's really better to leave your tropical flowers out. So flower care is also important when we're designing in foam. So contrary to popular belief, there is no flower food in the floral foam. So I want to make sure that I soak my brick of foam in properly mixed flower food water. I'm going to take my dry brick of foam, I'm going to just place it gently on the top of the water and let it sink naturally. If I force it underwater, I'm going to trap an air bubble. If my flower hits that dry pocket, that air bubble in the foam, the flower does not live, the flower dies, my customer is disappointed, and they might not ever call me and tell me, but believe me, they will tell everyone they know. Those flowers didn't last but more than a day. So I want to make sure I'm going to soak my foam properly in flower food water. I've got a beautiful ellipse vase here I'm going to use. I'm going to cut my foam. I'm going to use about 2/3 of a brick of foam. I'm going to trim off the bottom of this so I know it'll fit in my vase nicely. And this will just be a pressure fit down into my vase. I want to make sure I don't put a lot of force on that foam and crush that foam because that will damage the integrity of the foam, and I want to make sure that cell structure is maintained. Foam has a cell structure that closely resembles the cell structure of the flower, and I want to make sure that I don't crush that so I don't compromise that. So I've got a little bit of foam showing here. I'm just going to start by, again, clean sharp knife, inserting some of my ruscus. I'm going to continue, and I think I'm going to do more of a horizontal design versus something that is upright. Move those flowers. And I also want to make sure, just like I make sure in a vase arrangement that my stems go all the way to the base of my vase, I want to insert my stems deep into the foam so that they are connected to that water source. So I've got a nice base of foliage. You know, I mentioned there's no flower food in that foam. So what is in flower food? What makes it the perfect nutrition for my flowers? Well, there's sugar. That's the food source of the flowers. Once it's been disconnected from its root system, we need to give it some food. There's citric acid. That lowers the pH of the water. Flowers like a more acidic solution. And flower food that's properly mixed is the perfect pH for my flowers. Also, it has something I like to call stem unpluggers. So stem unpluggers are what keep those stems free flowing. So all those three elements are necessary in the right concentration to make sure that my flowers last a good long time. So I have a nice base, nice sort of horizontal design, and now I'm going to insert, again, inserting my flowers deep into the foam. I'll start with a little focal area here, nice sharp cut. Now what if I insert it into the foam, but it's not in the right place, it's not in the place I want? I want to remove my flower, give it a fresh cut, and then reinsert. If I keep reinserting and keep reinserting, I can actually pack the end of the flower, and I don't want to do that. So make sure, or if you bend the stem, let's say I'm inserting into the foam and I accidentally bend the stem. I want to take that out, cut above the bend, and then reinsert in my foam. The flowers have cells that go up through the stems. Think of them like drinking straws. And if I bend that drinking straw, think about how difficult it is to drink through a bent straw. So I'm going to take my flower, cut above that bend, and then reinsert. For example, I just bent the stem right there. I'm going to cut above that bend and then reinsert into my foam. We'll add a little pop of hot pink. You notice I'm fluffing open my carnations. This doesn't hurt the carnation. It's best to do this when they're at room temperature and they've been properly hydrated. Then I can just gently fluff those open and use that to base out my design. I'll put a few pops of yellow in. Nice yellow daisies. Now, one key to inserting a softer stemmed flower into foam so that it doesn't bend is to hold the stem as close to the insertion point as possible. This makes sure my stem has as much strength and support as necessary. If I try to push it in with not supporting it as I go in, I'm definitely going to bend that stem. So I'm going to hold this very close to the end of the stem, push it in to the foam as far as I can, and then just gently continue to back up my fingers and then push it a little bit further in so it's nice and connected to the water source, which is the foam in this case. I'm going to add another stem of stock. Same thing that I did with my vase design. I'm going to finish with a finishing spray, a light mist that will keep the flowers lasting even longer. When I present this to the customer, I'm going to tell them the basics of care and handling for the customer. We talked a little bit about the flower food. I may give them a few packets of flower food, instruct them how to properly mix it, and then add that water into their foamed arrangement. I am, of course, going to tell them to keep it out of direct sunlight, away from drafts, away from any heat sources, so that they can enjoy that flower arrangement as long as possible as well. So if we look at the basics of flower care, what's the most important? We kind of touched on it. Proper temperature is the most important. What if you're a studio florist or an event florist and you don't have that sort of situation where you have adequate coolers? Even more important that you do all of the other steps. But ideally, you want to maintain your flowers at the proper temperature. The next most important thing is cleanliness. I want to make sure that I'm cleaning my tools, my knife, my surfaces where I'm designing, my cutters. I want to make sure that these are clean. I don't want to transfer any bacteria from cutting bunches to the next bunch of flowers. So I want to make sure that these are clean at least every day. Clean and sharp tools. And then I also want to make sure I'm cleaning my buckets. This is a critically important step. I like to use a cleaner that's going to leave a residual inside the bucket to keep on killing bacteria over the course of the life of that flower in that bucket. So I want to make sure I clean my surfaces again with a good floral cleaner that's specifically designed to clean my tools, my surfaces, and my buckets. The next step is actually feeding. We touched on that briefly with making sure that the concentrations of the flower food in our buckets, that they're proper so that our flowers will maintain their color and will last longer for the consumer. So I'm actually going to, now that my flowers are properly conditioned, have been stored in proper temperature, I'm going to actually design with them. So now I'm going to take my properly conditioned flowers and I'm going to design a vase arrangement. In this vase, there is flower food water. It's properly mixed. If you don't have a dosing system, what you can do, and use that gallon jug as a measurement, so that way you know that each gallon jug that you have stored of pre-mixed is already ready to fill up your vases. Whatever system you use, just make sure that your flower food water is properly mixed. So I've got my sharp knife, and I'm going to start with clean, sharp cut. Same thing when we're designing in a vase. I want to make sure I remove any foliage that's going to be below the water line. Just like I don't want foliage down in my buckets, I don't want foliage down in the water. So I'm stripping off any lower leaves so I don't have that happen. So I'm using some salao and I'm just forming a collar of salao. I'm trimming off any leaves that might just be bruised or damaged. Sometimes just in the shipping process alone, you may have some bruised or damaged blooms. You want to make sure and remove those. This is a typical arrangement that you might see in your stores. I'm going to put in some roses now. I'm going to remove any birth petals, those petals that do all the hard work of opening the flower. And we'll add in a nice pop of orange color. Again, removing those leaves. And just starting with a great base, very colorful design. And I know that when my customer takes this home, because I've cared for these flowers all along the process, kept my coolers, my buckets, my tools nice and clean, fed them properly, I know that they're going to last as long as possible. One thing that we hear our customers say all the time, your flowers last longer. And that's because we take the time and don't skip the steps to keep them lasting. So So I've got some carnations. I'm going to strip off those leaves. We'll add in a few yellow daisies again. Just a nice pop of color. When I'm designing, I also want to make sure that I insert my stems all the way down to the bottom of the vase. If I only had my stems inserted into the very top, of course, as the water level goes down, those flowers are the first to be out of water, and they're going to be the first to die. So when you're designing, make sure that you insert your stems all the way into the vase, as far to the bottom of the vase as possible. Okay. So nice floral design, now what? I've done everything right along the way. Now I want to make sure I use a finishing spray. Now there's a couple different types of finishing sprays on the market. Both types are really fantastic products, but we need to be aware of the differences. We need to be aware of how they work. So there are finishing sprays that are fantastic for arrangements that are designed with a water source, arrangements that are designed down in a vase, or arrangements that are designed in floral foam. These are cellular level flower sprays. Okay, big words. What do we mean? They actually help to maintain the color, add a little bit of moisture, and help the flowers last longer. This would be something like finishing touch flower spray. And we're going to make sure we lightly spray my flowers before they would go out the door. So other types of flower sprays are what we call anti-transparents. Flower sprays that coat are going to be used on things that are disconnected from a water source, things like corsages, boutonnieres, or maybe something that might be in a high heat stress situation, like hydrangea out at an event in 96-degree weather. Although nothing can keep that flower from wilting in 96-degree heat, we can do our best to make it last as long as possible. And those coating sprays really work great in that application. So we want to make sure we take that extra step, that finishing touch, to make sure that the flowers are going to last for the consumer. The last thing we want to do is educate our customers. When our customers come into the store and they buy a bouquet of flowers, we can easily just give them the bouquet of flowers and send them on their way. But I want to educate the customer so, again, they have a great buying experience. So I will often tell my customers what we've done along the way. We've fed those flowers in our coolers. We've kept them at the proper temperature. We make sure everything is squeaky clean to make sure the flowers last long. We do the extra step of putting a nice finishing spray on the bouquet so they're going to last even longer. And then I'm going to educate my customers about flower food. So what I see a lot is customers who open up the flower food, they sprinkle a little in the water, kind of like fish food, they fold that away, and then they tuck it away for another use. I want to educate the customer, how much water does this packet of flower food treat? 1 liter of water. And I want to make sure that my customers know that. So what I like to tell them is, go ahead and mix this in 2 quarts of water, and then add that to your vase. Don't guess how much that vase might hold. All the vases that we have at the shop are going to hold different amounts of water. So I want to make sure that my customer knows how to mix this properly to add fresh flower food water to their arrangements, whether that's a foamed arrangement or an arrangement in a vase. So just to recap, I know we've talked about a lot, but just to recap the basics of flower care, we're going to start with quality product. We're going to clean that product, cut that product, dip that product, and put it in proper flower food water. We're going to maintain the proper temperature. Again, 34 to 38 degrees for most flowers, 55 to 60 degrees for tropical flowers. We're going to make sure that everything is nice and clean. We're going to make sure we feed those flowers properly, do the extra step of using a finishing spray, and then educate our customers so that they can care for their flowers once they get them home. We do all these things, and we're going to make sure that our flowers last as long as possible. Our customers have the best buying experience, and they continue to come back.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's session. It's been my pleasure to present on care and handling, but before we open it up for Q&A, I want to share a little history on how the American Floral Endowment has supported advancements in care and handling practices through funding research. AFE's research has helped to increase the vase life of cut flowers. From identifying the proper use of hydration solutions and flower foods to establishing correct temperatures for storage and shipping, ethylene management, proper sanitation, and cleanliness practices. AFE-funded research has enhanced flower care since providing the first care and handling grant back in 1971. The reports and articles about this research are available at endowment.org. While there, you can also request AFE's free care and handling poster covering best practices in flower care. This poster promotes results from AFE-funded research that stresses the three C's: cooling, cleanliness, and care, all essential factors to keeping flowers at their best. The link to request one of these is in the chat. AFE continues to support care and handling research and education on a diverse group of flowers and handling issues. Thank you to the American Floral Endowment for supporting the industry and this session. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Leynar to get us started with the Q&A.
Thank you, Loann, for your presentation. It was very informative and I really like it. So now I would like to open the session for questions. So if you have any questions, please submit it to the Q&A feature or through the chat and we can ask Loann. Let's use this opportunity with this amazing speaker to get all the answers that you could have. We have questions in the Q&A that said, you kind of mentioned in your presentation, but what's the name of the finishing spray?
So there are several fantastic finishing sprays on the market. One that I know of that is one of those coating topical application that is a coating solution and anti-transparent. That's Crowning Glory. There are several that act on the cellular level. You might have heard of Hawaiian Mist, Finishing Touch, Crystal Clear, I believe, but there are several great finishing sprays on the market that can help prolong the flower life.
Okay, great. I have a question that you mentioned about cleanliness a lot during your presentation.
Yes.
How often should I clean my cooler, for example?
So how often we would recommend that you clean your cooler? Every day you want to sweep up the debris off the floor. I was just walking through our coolers and we have many coolers at the shop that I work at. And those leaves that get on the floor, all the debris, that's just a breeding ground for bad things that you don't want. Ethylene gas production, bacteria, fungal growth. You just want to keep that as clean as possible. So we sweep our coolers every day and sometimes twice a day during busy seasons. I would recommend that you scrub down your cooler, pull everything away from the walls in your cooler, scrub down your coolers once a week. That's not always possible, but that would be optimal. So in best practices, I would say you want to clean your coolers at least once a week, as often as possible. So that's the goal.
Okay, great, thank you. It seems like we don't have any other questions. I have another one.
Okay.
You mentioned that you can cut the flowers with, you do it with this knife. It's kind of like machine thing to cut like with a very sharp knife or with scissors. Is there any difference which is better than the other, or is it just up to what I have?
So from a processing standpoint, whatever you're cutting your flowers with, whether it's a sharp pair of flower cutters or you're using one of those anvil style cutters, whatever it is, you want to make sure that that blade is nice and sharp. You want to make sure you're not crushing, like I said, the xylem tubes, the xylem cells that transport the water up the stem of the flower. You want to make sure you don't crush those. So it's imperative that you have sharp tools. Scissors are not the best from a designer standpoint really don't want to use scissors to cut because scissors don't have a sharp enough blade to really cut that flower stem properly. So a knife, that's my preference, is to use a sharp knife and a clean, sharp cut. If you have something like, I have a pair of Ohana shears that have 2 cutting blades. Both those blades are cutting surfaces. That's great to work with also. Always want to make sure that those are clean. What I don't want to use is something like a pruner that might have 1 dull surface and 1 sharp surface that might do some damage or crush that stem. So anything that is sharp and clean that will not crush the vascular tissue is going to be great to work with.
Okay, great. Speaking of processing,
Yeah.
Warm water or cold water, what is the best?
So back in the day, we used to say process in warm water. And flowers do uptake the water more quickly in warm water than cool. However, for the life of the flower, it's best to process in cool water. If you have to open something for event work, if I had to open up roses or quickly hydrate a flower, I can do that in warm water, but what I lose is the flower life. So I'm gonna take away a little off of the end life of the flower by processing that flower quickly and blasting it open quickly. So for general practice purposes, we want to process in cool water. Like I said, unless you really have to have it open for an event tomorrow, keep it cool.
Okay, great. We got some questions in the chat. One is, what is your preferred flower food brand?
What is my preferred flower food brand? I can tell you what we use at the shop. We use Professional Clear solution. So it is by Floralife. And so we have a bucket storage solution that we use for the buckets that are storing our flowers in the cooler. And then we also have flower food that goes in every vase and all the foamed arrangements that go out. So we at the shop use Professional Clear solution. There are many great flower foods on the market. You just want to make sure that you mix them properly. If you don't mix them properly, you might give your flowers a little bit of sugar, but not enough to keep them at their optimal level. You might give a little bit, just a slight lowering of the pH of the water, but not really enough for optimal water uptake. And you might give it a little bit of what I call those stem unpluggers that keep the flowers free flowing, but not enough to really keep the bacterial growth down. So whatever flower food you use, you want to make sure you mix it properly. And I know I said that about 1,000 times because it is that important.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Other questions that we got is, if you're aware of any foam shortages and when things might be back in stock.
So like everything in our supply chain, from fresh flowers to spray paint to foam, so many things affect our supply chain. So it could be the shortage of an ingredient, the shortage of a can. So we're going to experience some shortages in the supply chain, and that's going to affect everything from, I know we had some issues with some mache forms because there was an issue with the supplier that made the backing. And so I've heard of delays in foam production, but those, from what I understand, those are going to be temporary and those will eventually work themselves out. But it's just like everything else in the supply chain that we've experienced, there are going to be some delays.
Yeah, those are great news, at least that we're going to get them back at some point. Right.
Yeah.
I have one last question. That you mentioned that you don't need to keep your flowers in the hydration solution for like overnight. So how long should I keep my flowers in the hydro solution before put them in the cooler?
So there are different hydration solutions. There are quick acting hydration solutions that really sanitize. They're more like stem sanitizers. And then there are longer acting. I can speak to the quick acting because that's what I'm familiar with, but there are longer acting hydration solutions that you would keep in possibly for several hours. Don't quote me on that. Always read the package directions. but the one that we use at the shop is a quick acting. So it's just going to sanitize those stems and allow for faster uptake of water, but just know which one you're using and know the proper way to use it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Leyton. So if there's no more questions, I want to thank you for your time. And thank you everyone for joining us. Yeah. And thank you everybody for joining us today for another session of AIFD Grow Pro webinar series. We encourage you to view our full calendar at endowment.org/growpro and check back for more information of new sessions on 2022. While you are there, check out our past webinar recordings and other grower-related resources and research report available to you free, thanks to industry support. Our next webinar will be Control and Management on Powdery Mildew on Tuesday, December 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We ask you to please complete the Burke survey about today's session. Your feedback will help us continue to improve the monthly webinars and provide additional topics of importance. Thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day. Bye.